break, we went over the animal extension through an activity wherein you as researchers had to propose the use of animal models um, for the purpose of studying whatever behavior that you had chosen to study and whatever hormone, brain activity, or genetic aspect that you wanted to research. So I'm just going to go over quickly um, this unit in terms of possible theories that you can use, and also some researches. For a majority of the part, you have come across researches relating to brain and behavior and hormones and behavior in this, in the use of animals throughout the biological approach. So it shouldn't be too difficult for you to brainstorm researches available to use for this topic. So these are the possible questions. It's slightly overwhelming, to be honest, considering how many questions there are. Um, it can come, and the thing with the HL extension questions, okay, there's three cores. There's a cognitive approach, biological approach, and sociocultural approach. Each of these cores have HL extensions, and these HL extensions are going to come at least one question in your paper one um, long answer question or extended response question is going to be an HL question. So it is very important for HL students to know these extensions really well, and I recommend that we start writing our essays for these topics, and we are very well versed with this, the HL extensions, for the same reason. Okay, so for this extension on the use of animal models or the value of animal models in in understanding behavior, um, there's 9 different possibilities that can come. Again, these command terms can be different, okay? But to begin with, it can be a broad question, okay? Wherein, like, say, for example, discuss the value of animal models in psychological research. Here you can talk about research that's been done on animals to understand the brain and behavior. You can use hormones and behavior, you can use genetics and behavior. It is all up to you, okay? So a question like this that is general can come as well. To what extent can animal research provide insight into human behavior? This is a general question too. And this question, discuss ethical considerations in animal research. It allows you to talk about either brain and behavior, hormones and behavior, and genetics and behavior. So a question like this can be very general, or it can be specific to the area of brain and behavior, hormones and behavior, genetics and behavior. So here you can see discuss the value of animal models in the study of brain and behavior. You will only talk about brain activity, neurotransmission, neuroplasticity, and neurotransmitters in this topic. You will not talk about, let's say, for example, cortisol, which is a hormone, in an answer about brain and behavior. Okay? And you will not talk about genetics, let's say, for example, the warrior gene and MAOA in a brain and behavior question. Okay, so these questions, which I've highlighted in the color codes, are specific to an area. Okay, and we've gone over this whole chapter, and we've looked at it as brain and behavior, hormones and behavior, and genes and behavior. The same way the HL extension divides it up. So it can be broad, but it can be specific to these 3 areas as well. Okay, the same with ethical considerations. They can also be specific to these areas. Okay. So to begin with, I'm going to go over a model that was introduced by McLean in 1990. This really is helpful to use in your answers about brain and behavior. It's referred to as the triune model. Okay, I have gone over this previously in the past, but I'm going to go over it again. So here, according to this model, the brain is divided into 3 different sections. Okay, there's first the reptilian complex or the reptilian brain. Okay, this is the fight and flight part of the brain. It's the most primitive, the most old part of the brain that is there in all animals, okay, including reptiles. So this part of the brain is responsible for fight and flight, aggressive drives, anxiety regulations, and automatic functions such as temperature, blood flow, and hunger. So this part of the brain is responsible for very basic functions to occur. And mostly these are biological functions and automatic functions that you need for survival. Okay? And I have always used the example of the snake, right? There was a newsletter that was suggesting, or I don't know, it was probably fake news, but this lady had an anaconda or a python for a pet, and she was starting to get really worried because her pet snake, stopped eating for almost 2 weeks, I think, and she takes the snake to a vet and asks, I don't know what is wrong with my snake. I'm really worried. And the vet ends up telling her that the animal or the snake is preparing itself to eat her, right? So the reptilian brain, that the snake is only capable of understanding itself in terms of hunger pangs, basic drives for need to survive and being able to feed oneself. Okay, the next part of the brain, the limbic system, which is really responsible for attachment and emotions, is known as the paleomammalian brain, or just simply the mammalian brain. So here, this part of the brain is responsible for emotions, habit and memory, sexual drives, eating and reproduction, and attachment center. Okay? A snake, if they had this part of the brain, might not be wanting to eat um, their owner, okay? Because they'd be able to be attached to their owner and not just look at them as a piece of meat, okay? So the paleomammalian brain. This is an interesting one because I've talked about the dog, the Japanese dog, and the movie. I forget the name of the movie, but even after the owner dies, the dog goes every day to the train station to wait for his owner. Okay, this shows that mammals are capable of developing attachment. Okay, and have emotions. So this part of the brain is responsible for all of these. Okay, but the biggest part, the neocortex, that is only present in higher order mammals such as primates, like monkeys, chimpanzees, orangutans, and human beings, obviously. This part is responsible for rational and logical thinking, abstract thought, imagination and language, information processing and learning, and spiritual values. So, higher order cognitions are located or localized to this part of the brain and not the other basic primitive parts of the brain. So this dog, the same dog that I was talking about, Hachiko, I think that was the name of the dog. Um, if he had this part of the brain that was developed and was able to be capable of doing rational and logical thinking, he would be able to say, okay, my owner has died, I need to move on. It makes no sense for me to keep going to the train station every day waiting for my owner, right? And that is something that human beings are capable of doing. We're able to rationalize, we're able to think, and we're able to figure out even abstract thoughts, hypothetical situations, okay? So these are the three different layers or sections of the brain. And the argument about using animal models in the understanding of human behavior is that because we have similarities, like for example, we do share parts of our brain with other animals as well. So then we should be able to understand human behavior by using animal models, especially those that have really similar brain structure like orangutans and chimpanzees. Um, there has been a lot of ethical concern around using those animals because some of them are rare, okay, endangered, but also they're not found in as many numbers when compared to animals like rats, okay? But rats might not necessarily have very developed neocortexes, okay? So that is the drawback of that. But that's the argument that the triune model makes in using animal models for understanding human behavior through animals, okay? So pre-Mac in 2017, MacLean's model was introduced in 1990, and that is pretty old. In 2007, pre-Mac argued that one can't just study the brain and bodily functions to understand the similarities between animals and human beings, that we need to focus rather on psychological functioning as well. Okay? For example, primates, like I said, monkeys, chimpanzees, they have a neocortex too, which human beings have as well, and are 99% similar structurally and genetically to human beings. But then, if that's the case, why are they still in the jungle? Why are we here in cities that are highly developed with refined technology and a very different way of being? Okay, so even though we have this much of a similarity with them, okay, we are very different. So then, can we truly use animal models to understand the complexities of human behavior? So there's also the idea that there are molecular differences, and these differences um, have to do with neurons. Okay, we know that there's neuroplasticity. So a human being is capable of changing their brain structure and behavior over the lifespan. So how is it that we have used a model like the triune model, which looks at evolution and similarities? Okay, so there are a lot of molecular differences, and there's things that happen within the sections that MacLean talks about, and it's not just about chunking one part from the other. Okay, there's neuroplasticity. Parts of the brain increase in volume, decrease in volume, depending on our stimulus. Okay, even if we had to compare the brains of people in different environments, it will be quite different. Okay, and another very good point that Premack made is that similarities does not mean equivalence. Okay, we might have high rates of similarities, but this does not mean that we are equivalent in the same psychological functioning. Okay, and the biggest difference is with regards to psychological functioning. Okay, he then says that we need to also focus on the dissimilarities that we have in order to understand whether animal models can truly help us understand human behavior. Okay, and one of the examples, and I've talked about chunking a little in our models of memory lecture. So one example of the differences that we have even with our close relatives of chimpanzees is of short-term memory. Okay, just like us, chimpanzees have the same limit of number of units they can recall without rehearsing, right? Which is 7 units. They can remember 7 units of information in their short-term memory. Okay, but the difference is that chimpanzees do not have the ability to chunk. Okay, chunking is putting different information together to make one meaningful unit. Okay, so to chimpanzees, this list, okay, is 10 units. So 5, 4, 1, 2, 4, 7, 8, 9, 7, 1. These are 10 different units, okay, and an average chimpanzee would probably not be able to remember all of these numbers. But to human beings, we have the ability to chunk. So we can remember this whole list as 54, 12, 47, 89, and 71, and reduce it to just 5 units of information. Okay, so even if such a basic ability varies, how can this then be really equated to, and how can we truly say that animal models help us understand human behavior? Okay, this might then only suggest that we're limited to biological functioning, which again does not equate to psychological functioning. Okay, it's very reductionist for us to say biology equals psychology.